Just be disciplined is terrible advice. I've been carnivore for 6 months now. I've lost a lot of body fat and cured a number of lifelong ailments. Sticking with carnivore is like a walk in the park. Starting with carnivore, oh my God! Not so much. Here are the proven tips that will make your first 2 weeks as easy as pie. Carnivore pie, not cherry pie. Ugh. The first tip has got to be eat red meat every single day. Make sure that one of your meals is beef or lamb or some other kind of red meat. If you go a full day eating just pork or chicken or deli meats or cheeses or whatever, you're not going to have success. Your first week should be full of your favorite meals. If that's ribeyes, buy a bunch of ribeyes and eat ribeyes your entire first week. Eat when you are hungry. Intermittent fasting is cool. I used to be a big intermittent faster. I saw a lot of success with that. However, going carnivore and setting a goal of how many hours you should be fasting is a recipe for disaster. Listen to your stomach. Here's an easy one. Invest in better eggs. If you're buying those crappy styrofoam box eggs, you're not going to see the full benefits of consuming them on a carnivore diet. Don't be afraid of variety on the carnivore diet. There are so many carnivores out there that talk about, I just eat 2 ribeyes a day. Steak is great. I love steak. But if you don't, get started by eating your favorite meats, okay? If that's bacon and some chicken, go ahead and do that. Just make sure another one of your meals is ground beef or steak that day. Understand that your first 2 weeks are going to be challenging. I know that carb cravings exist, but I promise you that the carb cravings do subside after about 3 or 4 weeks, maybe sooner. If you're lacking motivation, consume something carnivore every single day. I'm talking about carnivore media. For me, I really enjoyed the Shawn Baker podcast. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube, like me, but there's a lot of others out there as well. Another quick tip, take measurements before you start, because the scale doesn't tell the whole story. On that note, also take photos before you start, because again, the scale doesn't tell the whole story. Speaking of Dr. Shawn Baker, he wrote a great book called The Carnivore Diet. I recommend reading the book, pick it up, flip through it, read it front to back. That's going to help with a lot of motivation of the science and the history of the diet. Take it one day at a time. Don't stress about getting to day 100. Just figure out how you're going to get through today, how you're going to get through this week. Don't stress if you've got another 90 days in front of you. Just take it day to day. Don't stress about spices the first 2 weeks. A lot of carnivores will talk about how things in your spice drawer are going to make you sick. And a lot of carnivores eventually get to a place where they are only seasoning with salt. But unless you have an autoimmune issue, make your food delicious, okay? Not all of us can just eat ground beef and butter and be okay with that, especially when you're adapting. Don't stress about the spices, you'll live. And if you need more spice or if your taste buds want more, here's a pro tip. Eggs. Egg yolks are kind of like the carnivore spice of life. If you're just sick of ground beef, cook a couple of over easy eggs and let the yolk go in there. It's a game changer for boring ground beef. When you're starting out, it's nice to have 2 meats for dinner. So we had a lot of meals that was ground beef and chicken thighs. Do what you like, but when you go from a diet of eating kind of a full plate of lots of different foods, it is weird to just kind of sit down to a steak. So to help ease you into that, it's really helpful to have 2 different meats prepared. Usually chicken thighs and some kind of beef is a good combo. You will need to get used to the fact that you may have to eat beyond your comfort level, especially if it's ground beef or red meat and you're just not into it. Your first few weeks, you may have to get used to over-consuming because your body really needs the extra nutrition as it's transitioning. Quick tip, when you go to the table, bring the salt. Save yourself a trip of going up to get it. Plan your meals every single day. You should never be guessing what your next meal should be. Poor planning makes for bad decisions. If you feel like you need a treat, pour yourself a glass of whole milk. Bonus points if it's raw milk. There's a conversation about animal-based versus carnivore, and there's this thing where a lot of people are incorporating a lot of fruits and maple syrup and honey because they don't have the same harmful oxalates that some vegetables do. I think that there's a time and place for that, but it's not when you're adapting to carnivore. So don't fall for the narrative that you can add in a bunch of maple syrup and honey and fruits and be okay. Those are still cheats on the carnivore diet. Now, I don't want you to beat yourself up if you do find yourself cheating, but I do want to say something that is very important. You know by now that fat is not the enemy. However, if you combine a high-fat diet with frequent cheats of sugar, you're going to spike your insulin, and your insulin is going to do really nasty things to your arteries using that fat and cholesterol. Fat's not the bad guy. Sugar's the bad guy, which causes the insulin spike. But please do not make a habit of cheating while you're on carnivore. Salt is your friend. Make sure you're eating real salt. I really like Redmond's. They do a good salt. Another way to get enough salt in you is to consume a supplement. I really like Element. They do good salt. I really like their citrus flavor in the middle of the day or at night. A warm cup with the chocolate flavor salt is a nice treat. Drink a lot of water. That will also help with satiety and salt retention, but you'll need the extra water when you're starting out. Magnesium is your friend, specifically magnesium glycinate, which is a very bioavailable version of magnesium, and it's specifically helpful when you can't sleep. A lot of people going carnivore talk about how sleep troubles them in the first few weeks. Magnesium glycinate is your friend. Let's get into the mindset of this. I recommend before you start carnivore, write down your why. Anytime you're up against a wall and something is challenging in the carnivore, go back to that why. Avoid an all or none approach. Again, if you do find yourself with a little bit of a cheat, don't stress it. Just get back on it tomorrow. I'd also recommend that you stay off the scale for your first 2 weeks. And now I've seen a lot of success stories where morbidly obese people just shed a bunch of weight. And if you are in that camp where you are very overweight, that could be motivating. However, if you're in the camp that kind of I was in, where yes, I had fat to lose, but not necessarily a lot of weight, then the scale might be more harm than good in the first couple of weeks. At least it was for me. I'll just be honest about that. Getting on the scale my first few weeks and seeing stories online of people losing 5 pounds a week or crazy stuff like that, and me losing ½ to 1 pound, it was disheartening. So I recommend staying off the scale for most folk. I recommend picking a timeline that you'll be doing carnivore, not a weight goal. Okay, so don't say, I'm going to do carnivore until I'm X weight. Instead, say, I'm going to do carnivore for 30 days, 60 days, 100 days. I found that by the time I hit day 60, I didn't think I was ever going to go back. So the timeline thing is nice because you kind of trick yourself into just making it a lifestyle. That's what this is all about, tricking yourself. But seriously, don't set a goal that you're going to hit a certain weight, because that's just not really healthy mindset. The most challenging aspect of carnivore are the social implications behind it. So let's address some of those. May I please ask a favor of you? Your first couple of weeks of carnivore, when you're all excited, please don't become that annoying person that is a blabbermouth about carnivore and you don't have the results to show it. Just quietly go carnivore and wait for the results to speak for themselves. When you are going out, eat before you go out. Okay, pre-game with some chicken or some steak. Make sure that you're satiated, because when you're out of the house, you're not satiated, you make bad decisions, especially in a social setting. And in those social settings, have a backup plan. I'll give you an example. If you're going to a wedding and you can't turn down free cake, make the plan to say, instead of eating 2 or 3 pieces of cake, I will split 1 piece of cake with my date. That will help in a number of ways. One, it will help alleviate the social pressure because people freak out if you don't have cake at a wedding. Number 2, you're going to still feel like you met a goal. You planned to have a half piece of cake and you did have a half piece of cake. And then the third benefit is you didn't eat 2 or 3 pieces of cake. You had a half piece of cake and you go back on carnivore tomorrow. And recognize that after 60 or 90 days, you will have zero desire to eat the cake anyway. Avoid eating out of the house altogether your first few weeks. I know that a lot of people online show that, hey, look, McDonald's made me this carnivore burger. Just stop it. Just eat food in your house. Unless you're in an emergency, which I get that happens, but don't make a trip out of going out to eat crappy food. I promise you can make better food in your house. Be prepared to have your friends tell you that you're killing yourself. A lot of people are confused about the narrative on the carnivore diet. I've just never seen any fruit come from arguing with somebody who is really concerned about my health. Just let the results speak for themselves. You have a lot of friends in your lifetime. You only have one body. If you feel constipated on the carnivore diet, eat more fat and cut out dairy. Caveat to that, butter is okay. If you are constipated, prioritize butter and fattier cuts of meat, and then cut out other dairy. I'm talking about like milk and hard cheeses. Constipation was my big issue for going carnivore, and let me say, we are clean as a whistle down there. So there's hope at the end of the constipation tunnel. If you are experiencing the keto flu, the carnivore flu, whatever people call it, prioritize these 3 things: red meat, sleep, and electrolytes. Okay, speaking of sleep, I found that I was exhausted as soon as the sun went down. I was so tired for almost the first month of going carnivore. Go to bed when you're tired. My theory is that the circadian rhythm becomes a lot more sensitive because you're eating in a more primal way. Eventually, after about day 30, you will find that you need a lot less sleep than you did before. But in the beginning, you might need more. If you find that you're still struggling, consider that you might be eating foods that you shouldn't be eating. I'll give you some examples. Pork rinds and sour cream, that's a nice treat. And by all means, enjoy it as a treat. But that is not a meal. That is not really helping you. Just because it's approved doesn't mean that it's getting you further along on your carnivore journey. Same thing with deli meats and hard cheeses. They're okay as a treat. By all means, treat them as a treat. But make sure that you're having the red meat, chicken, other things that are actually a meal. Invest in a cast iron pan and learn how to cook in that. When you're making food, make food for tomorrow. I can tell you that it is really nice to have cold steak or cold chicken in the fridge when you want lunch the next day. Regarding exercise, you might start feeling very good on the carnivore diet and you might take up running or biking, but I would suggest as you're getting started, avoid cardio. If you do want to do more, go for walks or work in some resistance training. Get good at cooking steaks. You're going to need that skill. Invest in a sous vide, invest in a smoker, or learn how to do it in your oven, because reverse sear is a foolproof way to make an amazing steak every time. You won't want to eat out anymore when you start making your own steaks. Yes, ribeyes are amazing cuts of meat. They're also very expensive. Look for chuck meat. I like to go to Costco and I buy a big slab of chuck and I cut it up into steak-sized shapes, and those are the steaks that I eat at least half of the time. Much cheaper. Maybe the weirdest thing you'll hear me say on this is you don't need grass-finished beef. Shocker, I know, because if you watch this channel, you know that I have a homestead, I raise a lot of my own meat, I love regenerative agriculture. Grass-finished beef is so good for the planet. Don't feel bad if you can't afford that, because a conventionally raised cow that produces conventional beef has a lot more nutrition in it than even like an organic chicken or organic pork. Now, I'm not saying that's an excuse to always have the worst quality beef and that I'm okay with CAFOs. I'm not. I wish the data said otherwise, but the truth of it is that grass-finished beef is only marginally better than conventionally raised beef. The last step is to invest your time in watching other people's carnivore successes. In fact, I made a video covering how my lifelong battle with back pain, my time on the toilet, and holding on to stubborn fat was all cured within 100 days of carnivore. If you want more motivation, that's a really good place to start. I hope to see you on that video, and good luck nailing your first 2 weeks of carnivore.